What is up, Janksters? It's your boy Graham, also known as HamHawks42 on the internet, and today we're going to be looking at commons from March of the Machine. Rather than spend a full episode on individual cards that fit kind of this mold, I wanted to take a look at a group of them and kind of do them rapid fire, because these are designs that are similar to cards we've seen in the past, and as a result, maybe don't merit the same level of a full overthinking treatment. But I did notice a general trend where it looks like the commons from this set are generally pretty powerful, and I think a lot of them are not only going to be role players in limited, which we see a lot from the common slot. I mean, obviously they're like the bread and butter of a lot of limited decks, are the commons and uncommons, and okay, that's great, but I honestly think that we're at a point right now where the commons in this set are of a power level where they might see some constructed play, or at the very least, these are cards that can fill slots in commander decks very, very comfortably. So I didn't specify or didn't limit myself to a particular number of commons. I just went through all the commons that were in March of the Machine and pulled out the ones that I thought were noteworthy. So as a result, this isn't like a top 10 list. This isn't like a top 5 list. I have 8 of them, in fact, and it's in no particular order. Like the ones that are last, actually the last one is the one I'm most excited for, although I'll probably have the least to say on it because it's pretty straightforward. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's the best, so keep that in mind. So with that, let's just jump right on into it, and we're going to start with Cosmic Hunger. Now, the reason that I wanted to start with this card is because it is a twist on Rabid Bite, which is kind of a classic that was in a lot of like core sets. It was just kind of the go-to, green needs removal, so we give them Rabid Bite. So Rabid Bite, if you're not familiar, is a 1 in a green sorcery that says target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to another target creature. Okay, great. Like, it's a bite effect. It's not a fight effect. That's actually where the name kind of bite comes from. And so Cosmic Hunger, we see what appears to be Coma bearing down, or some other Phyrexian, cosmic worm bearing down on a Kaldheim longboat. So we have a bite pictured, which is kind of thematic. But in this case, we have an instant for 1 in a green that says target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to another target creature, planeswalker, or battle. So this is kind of the triple crown, if you will. The only thing this can't hit as far as damageable permanents go, or damageable targets go, is a player. So this can hit any non-player permanents. That's awesome, or at least any that can be damaged. So you can't deal damage to a land yet that I'm aware of, unless it's been turned into one of these. But so for two mana, any creature can bite another creature, a planeswalker, or a battle. And this is going to be key because dealing damage to a battle can flip it. So if you are playing battles in your green decks and you have a lot of creatures in there, this can, effectively just for 2 mana, just win you a battle, and you can then take all that damage. You can flip the battle. So if you get a creature with haste out of it, okay, sweet, you can just jam. But then you can benefit from the battle before combat on your turn. That's actually a big deal. So I think this is downright excellent, and the biggest key that I want to point out here is that it's an instant. Rabid Bite and a lot of other bite effects, or even fight effects, which kind of serve a lot of the same purpose, often show up at sorcery. The difference between sorcery and instant is massive. Like, I cannot stress how important that is. And so the fact that this is an instant, I think means, like, this is the best bite effect we've seen printed possibly yet. It's the only one that can hit battles that I'm aware of. So, sweet. Like, I think this is going to be, I wouldn't be surprised if this becomes the new gold standard common that is printed as, like, premium green removal at common, that future draft sets are going to see. So I think that, like, Cosmic Hunger, I just think it's just good. 2 mana, kill a thing if you're playing green. And it's like anything. And the fact that it can hit planeswalkers too, that's incredible. Anyway, yeah, just really good green removal. Next up, another green card, we have Attraxa's Fall. So this one is a sorcery, which is like the only knock against it, because otherwise it's just really slick. Is 1 in a green. Destroy target artifact, battle, enchantment, or creature with flying. Now, I want to compare this with Cosmic Hunger because they're both 2 mana removal in green. And in the case of Cosmic Hunger, you need to have a creature online to make it work. In the case of Attraxa's Fall, you do not. And notably, both can hit battles, but you want to play them completely differently. Because in order to activate a battle, you have to remove the last counter. So, if you're using Cosmic Hunger to deal damage to a battle, you want to use that on battles that you control so that you can flip them and take advantage. In the case of Attraxa's Fall, it's a destroy effect. So you can destroy a battle, which will not flip it. It'll just get it off the board. So this is one you'd want to use on your opponent's battles. And it can also hit artifacts, enchantments, or creature with flying. Flying creatures are a big freaking deal, and they're common. You know, this is the new school Broken Wings. Broken Wings is a card that has appeared in a lot as a common piece of removal in a ton of sets, most recently in Dominaria United. So Broken Wings is standard legal, but it doesn't really see a lot of play. If we're in a situation where certain flyers are really prevalent, it's the kind of effect that you might see in sideboards, but that's about it. We also have kind of this perfect storm right now in standard, as of this recording anyway. Hopefully when Mom comes out, this can change, but which I'm not holding my breath, to be honest, but Broken Wings and cards like it, actually the other one that was pretty common was Tangle Trap. Those were great in metas where big flyers were a big deal. You know, in metas where Goldspan Dragon was tearing things up, being able to just point and click remove Goldspan Dragon off the field, granted it protected itself in a weird roundabout way, but assuming it would stick, that's a very powerful effect. So if your opponent is likely to have a big flyer online, being able to just pop it easily coming out of the sideboard is very useful. But if you can't take advantage of that mode, these cards generally are not good, like usually. However, this one does have the ability to destroy battles, which we don't know if that's going to be relevant yet or not as far as competitive meta goes, but we'll see. Or it can destroy artifacts and enchantments. Now, we know artifacts and enchantments are everywhere right now. That is something that we see all the time. Those are just ubiquitous, frankly, in standard anyway. You know, we have Fable, we have Bankbuster. I mean, if my opponent throws a Bankbuster and I turn 2 Attraxa's Fall, blast it, that feels great. Like, we did the thing, 2 mana, clean answer, sweet. Now, it is a sorcery, which is a downside, but honestly, I feel like this is a pretty strong card because it only costs 2. You know, so it's easy to compare this with Broken Wings because it has that creature with flying mode on it. But honestly, this also compares pretty nicely to cards like Naturalize, which again is an instant, which, this being sorcery speed, I think is going to keep it out of a lot of meta decks, assuming that, well, I don't know, assuming that green is even playable at all. Because honestly, just the fact that it's a green spell is going to keep it out of the current meta, which is really unfortunate. Not that like this needs to be in the meta, but this is a very efficient version of this effect, and I don't know, I think that is noteworthy, and I have a feeling we're going to start seeing these effects at 2 mana more and more moving forward, because at 3 it just gets outclassed by everything right now, unless there are gigantic bugaboo flyers in the format that you need point and click removal for. But all in all, pretty decent. Also in general, I love the fact that they're like leaning into the old school color identity of green hates flyers. I love that. I think that's awesome, and I want to see more of it. So interesting stuff. All right. Next up, we have Scroll Shift. So this is our first white card that we're going to talk about today. I say that as though there's a huge list of white cards after this. But the reason I want to talk about Scroll Shift, this isn't a particularly amazing card. This is a unique, like, role player at best, to be completely frank. But it has a couple of things going for it that I think are noteworthy. Now, it's a 3 mana instant. So at that price, in this environment, we need to get a lot for what we're doing here. So what do we get? For 2 and a white, instant, exile up to 1 target artifact, creature, or enchantment you control, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control, draw a card. If it wasn't for that those last three words, sorry, on the last line, this card is stone unplayable, completely awful, don't even consider it. But the fact that it has that on there is huge, because we have mono white, like mid-range control decks dominating the format right now. And this all of a sudden being able to re-trigger an Ambitious Farmhand, being able to re-trigger Spirited Companions, Restorations of Iganjo. Like, if your opponent is about to wipe the board and you have a flipped Restoration of Iganjo sitting there, being able to blink it out, draw a card, and then have the Saga re-enter the battlefield in a way that presumably it's not going to die unless they're hitting with like a farewell. Like, those kinds of tricks become very powerful if you time these right. And as a result, and also just the fact that everything right now has, it feels to me anyway, like a ton of stuff has ETB triggers. Like, they're just everywhere. And so the fact that you can just blink, and it can hit artifacts, creatures, or enchantments. So, You can retrigger your sagas. You can retrigger your portal to Phyrexias if that's the jam you're working with. Your Atalis, which is the new one that I'm going to be having a ton of fun with. This kind of effect becomes really, really strong with those kinds of cards, or Attraxa even. Good lord. Anyway, like the amount of card advantage you could theoretically get off this is kind of gross, and you can use it in a way to protect your things. I mean, I think that's actually pretty strong. 3 mana is asking a lot, to be completely fair. So I feel like this is an appropriate power level at common. Like, this isn't going to make any huge waves, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see it, honestly. All right, next up. I want to talk about a card that I'm very intrigued by, but I honestly don't think it's going to see play anywhere outside of Limited. In Limited, I think it's going to be solid, but it's Core Halberd. The reason that I wanted to talk about this is because this design is, in my opinion, what equipment ought to be. You know, because in recent memory, equipment has been, in my opinion, equipment has just been too expensive. It has been so difficult to make equipment work, even in limited environments that are designed to have equipment as one of the sub-themes. It just, I don't know. When I'm spending 5 mana for equipment that can grant like +3/+3 or +3/+2, it's just too much for not enough. Now, in the case of Core Halberd, I feel like they hit the right, sweet spot. So this is 1 white mana for an artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has vigilance. Equip 1. So it's going to move around easily, and you're granting vigilance and a slight power buff to any one of your creatures. I like this a lot. I don't think this card is going to make any huge waves because it's basically a +1/+1 counter that can like move around. But that might give you what you need in combat. Like, those little edges go a long way. Now, is it worth a whole card? In most decks, probably not. But in the right deck, this might be really great. And vigilance is a big deal. And so, like, this is the kind of thing that I wouldn't be surprised if there's a fringe use for, just because it is so efficient. Like, in a really low to the ground, aggressive artifact deck, this is an equipment you might consider playing. And we haven't had one of those in a long time. So at least not, I mean, for Mirrodin cards, actually, even then, I don't think, actually come to think of it, I just built an aggressive artifact deck just earlier, the same day I'm recording this on stream, and I didn't consider any of the Mirrodin cards. Not a single one. Yeah. So take that for what it's worth. So honestly, I think Core Halberd is really solid. Like, cheap, efficient, gives you the thing. If you want vigilance, this gets there. It's also really relevant with Wandering Emperor being critical removal that a lot of people are running right now, because vigilance gets around that. So it's well positioned in the current meta too. Like, the keyword that it gives is kind of one of the best ones you want right now. So I like it. All right, next up, Ren's Resolve. I don't have much to say on this one because this is a functional reprint of Reckless Impulse. So for 1 and a red sorcery, exile the top 2 cards of your library until the end of your next turn. You may play those cards. It draws you 2 cards in red. I feel like this is a worthy inclusion here, though, because mono red aggro lists are running Reckless Impulse right now. I've seen it on the ladder, especially in Best of 1, quite a bit. Ren's Resolve can all of a sudden become copies, 5 and 6 if you want that. But the other thing that this does, because it's basically reckless, it is Reckless Impulse, straight up. Like, as far as the rules are concerned, they're identical cards. But they have different names. And so as a result, if that's an effect you want in your commander deck, you just got a second one. That's kind of cool. Like, I like that. So these functional reprints with different names, I believe, are done, one, because it allows them to use story spotlights like this. So this is depicting the moment when Ren merged with Realmbreaker. And in the story, she describes it as feeling the fire inside her burning. Like, so intensely that she doesn't believe she can handle it. And so that being depicted on a red card makes sense. We also saw, like, Ren in 6 was, in recent Rens have been mono green, but Ren in 6, which was the first instance of us seeing this character, was Gruul. So, it was green red. So Ren being depicted on a red card, it is fitting, kind of going back to kind of the start of that character, which is kind of neat. So I like it. I think it's a cool card. It is basically Reckless Impulse. If you like Reckless Impulse, you should like this card because they're the same card. So good stuff. Next up, Trailblazing Historian. This card is interesting, in my opinion. Not that it's necessarily doing anything super new, but it's doing an effect in a slightly different way than we've seen before, at least that I'm aware of. That is, it's just good. So, Trailblazing Historian, for 1 and a red, you get a 1/3 with haste, and it's a human shaman. Tap, another target creature gains haste until end of turn. So, creatures in red that tap to give other creatures haste, that's something that we've seen a ton. You know, there was Axguard Cavalry in Kaldheim. There was like Goblin, Rabble, not Rabble. Anyway, there were like Goblin. There were 1/1 goblins for 1 that can tap to grant haste all the time. Like that's an effect that we've seen a bunch. The thing that makes Trailblazing Historian noteworthy and why I included it on this list is because it itself has haste. So what that means is if you have another creature, if you have this in your hand and you have another creature that does not have haste, basically for 2 mana you can give that thing haste out of nowhere that your opponent didn't see coming. So you can play the Trailblazing Historian, play the other thing, tap Trailblazing Historian, give that other thing haste, whatever it may be, crash in, you're having a great time. So I think that is a noteworthy trick. Like this is basically a trick and it stays behind. So it's a 1/3. If your opponent doesn't answer it, you can give the next thing haste too. So it's just a decent card. Like it's not amazing, it's not setting the world on fire, but in like, you know, Gruul aggro or Naya aggro lists that have access to red that want to bestow haste on things. Granted, we have Reckless Stormseeker in standard right now. That's probably going to take the spot in a lot of decks depending on the curve. But if you're on a budget and you want Stormseeker but you don't have them like in your arena collection or whatever the case may be, Trailblazing Historian kind of fits the role. And it might actually fit on your curve better because it's a 2-drop. So honestly, I just think it's just a good role player. If you need to give other things haste, this does it really well. And in a way that, I don't know that I've seen in recent memory. So it's pretty cool. All right. Next up, this is one that I am incredibly excited for. I love this card because I have a Sultai Mutate Commander deck, and this is going into it immediately. Saiba Cryptomancer. This is a 0/1 for 1 and a blue Moonfolk Ninja with Flash and backup 1 and hexproof. This is a creature at common for 2 with Flash that has hexproof. Now, if you're not familiar with the backup mechanic, it is new in March of the Machine. The way that it works is when the Saiba Cryptomancer enters the battlefield, the backup will trigger, and you choose target creature, and you put a +1/+1 counter, in this case, because it's a backup 1, so you put 1 +1/+1 counter on it, and then it gains the abilities of this creature, so it gives hexproof to something else. So for 2 mana, this is a protection spell. So if your opponent casts like a kill spell on one of your other creatures, you throw this down for 2, you give that other thing a +1/+1 counter and hexproof. So not only are you not killing it, opponent, but now it's a little bigger. And I've got the 0/1 over here that you also can't touch. Granted, it's just a 0/1, but it does have hexproof. Now, that is noteworthy for a couple of reasons. One, it's, you know, if you have mutate or auras, like if you're doing any kind of boggle situation, this is a very real place where you can kind of pile that stuff up. You know, this with and all the glitters on it could probably really wreck shop. So that's great. But on top of that, if your opponent's running edict effects, like Sheoldred's Edict or Liliana of the Veil, this leaves a 0/1 body on the field that you can sacrifice to satisfy those without really caring too much. So that's fantastic. So this is, it is a flash speed, so it's an instant speed effect that grants hexproof and puts a body online that can satisfy edicts for you. So this is a way to answer a ton of different removal that's out there. I think that's excellent. Straight up excellent. I love this. I think this card is going to be the kind of trick that you might see in certain decks. And on top of that, it's a ninja. And now, it doesn't have any evasion by itself. However, if you're running other ninjas, so if you have a ninja deck, you can leverage this, because if you attack with it, and assuming you have other attacks, your opponent will rarely block it unless it's like a free block where they might as well if they have no reason not to. And then all of a sudden, if they don't block it, you can bring it back to hand and, you know, ninja in another creature. And then from there, you can also recast it from your hand at flash speed with the backup to give something a +1/+1 counter and hexproof. I think this card is just really good. There's a ton of play to this thing, and I'm excited to get my hands on it. Honestly, it's fantastic. All right, and there's one more card I want to talk about, and it's really, this is going to be a quick one. Like I said at the top, the one that, I don't know, actually this one, the more I talk about it, the more I sell myself on it. So Saiba Cryptomancer, this is going to be where it's at, I think. But the last one that I want to talk about that I think is just downright excellent is Corrupted Conviction. This is a card that I can't wait. I can't wait. Literally, prior to this, I was looking at the new Hidetsugu and Kairi, because that card, if it has a death trigger on it, that it allows you to free cast stuff off the top of your library, and it has an ETB that's effectively Brainstorm. And so I was thinking, man, I want there to be instant speed sack effects, or just cheap, efficient sacrifice effects in Standard, so that I can drop Hidetsugu, load the top of my library, sacrifice it, and then blast my opponent for a bunch off the free cast. That's what I want to do. I think that's the possibilities for janky combos are definitely there, and I want to make it happen. And I was thinking, as I was looking at that card before this got spoiled, man, it would be so nice if Village Rites was legal in Standard. Because for 1 mana, we sacrifice the thing, and I draw 2 cards, and we blast our opponent's face. Yeah, because the death trigger would go on the stack before we drew the cards. We'd be able to leverage what we teed up on top of the library. Would be perfect. If only Village Rites was legal. And I put that wish out into the universe, and Wizard said, not only are we going to give you that Village Rites effect, but we're going to give it another name. So just like I mentioned earlier, this allows us to play multiples of them in Commander. So if you have Village Rites in a Commander deck and you are happy with its performance in that Commander deck, you have the option of putting in a second copy now. Corrupted Conviction, instant for 1 black, as an additional cost to cast a spell, sacrifice a creature, draw 2 cards. Simple, effective. Is Deadly Dispute a better card? Yes. Am I going to take this anyway? You betcha. Yeah, absolutely. I love it. Yeah, Corrupted Conviction is dope. I think this card is just nothing short of fantastic. If you have death triggers, if you have sacrifice effects, being able to, and honestly, even if you don't, being able to, in an aggressive black deck, like, so if I'm just swinging in and I know some of my creatures are going to die in combat, like if I have a lot of little 1/1s and 2/2s and I'm just going phase, if one of them gets blocked in a way that's not advantageous, just sacrifice it to this, draw a couple cards, reload, and keep going. You know, combine that with like a Morbid Opportunist situation, all of a sudden you're looking at getting a lot of value off of those triggers. So honestly, I don't know, mono black aggro might be a thing again, and this could be like a 2 or 3 of in a deck like that. So anyway, there's a lot of play to this style of effect. I adore it, and I'm glad it's back. So, thank you for checking out the show. This has been another edition of the Overthinking MTG podcast. Normally, I look at an individual card, and that's an entire show. This time around, I wanted to kind of do a little group, do a little, a little bundle of cards, if you will. So, thank you for checking it out. I appreciate it very, very much. If you enjoy this, please like and subscribe if you're watching on the YouTube. If you're watching, or if you're listening, rather, in in your podcast app of choice, please follow, subscribe, whatever that's called there. So, thank you so much. I appreciate you. And my phone's going off. Sorry about that. I'll catch you on the next one.